Welcome to the Global Wellness HQ family of podcasts. We are your international headquarters for resources and ideas and insight in relation to the 9 elements of holistic wellness. Join us as we interview local and international wellness experts and learn how you can implement and improve one element or dimension of wellness at a time. Our experts will share their practical tips on wellness in one of these core areas: emotional, intellectual, occupational, physical, environmental, financial, spiritual, social, or habitual. We created our family of podcasts as a resource for anyone who is looking to integrate the 9 elements of holistic wellness into their daily lives. Welcome to the show. The Global Wellness HQ family of podcasts is proudly sponsored by the Global Wellness HQ community. It's an online membership group where we meet, we share ideas, we share insights, and we all work together and help one another discover our own personal wellness journeys. If you'd like to join us, you can easily click the link below or scan the QR code, and we love hearing your stories. So we hope to see you in the community.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Today, I have my new friend, Stephen Photianos. Stephen, welcome to the show. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, hey, Jeff, thanks for having me on today. Well, I'm a man who wears a few little hats in the community down here. I live down in Georgia, Kennesaw, Georgia, specifically. It's a little north of Atlanta. By profession, I am a real estate agent, and I love helping people in the community. But I also volunteer at my local church as a Stephen minister. I'm actually Stephen leader of the Stephen ministry at my particular church, at Sanctuary in him. And I also am involved with various recovery programs like Celebrate Recoveries. Those are also church faith-based. So a lot of my passions and heart is out for people in Christ-centered, confidential kind of care. My main theme of life is I think people need a safe space, whether that safe space is a home, that safe space is somewhere to talk and feel safe, just somewhere where you can feel secure and not have to stress. So that's a little bit about me.
And I want to point out, we were just talking before we started recording that Stephen is a Stephen minister, and you were saying that's both convenient and confusing, right?
Yes, for people who haven't heard of Stephen Ministries, I'll say, yes, I'm a Stephen minister. And they're like, oh, you have a ministry. I'm like, no, it's not my ministry. So like Stephen Ministry is actually a nationally recognized ministry that goes throughout many churches throughout the US, and I believe also up into Canada and a few other nations. But it's basically a faith-based lay care ministry that's supposed to be totally confidential. We basically are paired up with someone who is struggling through a hard time. Could be grief, death, could be disease, cancer, could be just, hey, my kids went away to college and I'm sad about it. Like whatever the situation is, we're there to both listen to them and help them with prayer and scripture and just be present. We meet up with them each week, and nobody knows who you are. So if you really need a safe space to get everything out, that's what we provide for them.
I love that. And I think, with the world the way it's been the last few years, I think people have gotten very isolated or feel very isolated. So I think it's amazing that there are organizations that are just there to listen, because I think the biggest mistake I see people making, especially with wellness, is trying to figure things out themselves. Sometimes we need that guidance, and maybe it's somebody who's been there before us, but sometimes it's just somebody who is there to listen so that we aren't alone.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's change gears just slightly, because you and I have a lot we could talk about. I want to come back and talk about you as a Christian recovery sponsor. I think that's going to be fascinating. But first, I'm going to ask you what concepts are pivotal, because we talk a lot about wellness, and I honestly don't know how to separate emotional wellness from spiritual wellness. I feel like you get one, you get both. But what concepts do you see as pivotal for emotional and spiritual wellness?
Well, I am a Christian, obviously. There is definitely a lot of core concepts from scriptures and from teachings of the Gospels that Jesus teaches that we can extrapolate from, even if you don't necessarily have faith in that area. The certain concepts are kind of universal. So, to coupled with my ministry, I said I'm in some recovery things that I work with, lots of 12-step recovery programs, like AA, and I've worked with NA, those kinds of things. And the 12 steps and most recovery programs, the overall theme when you go through it comes down to forgiveness and amends. Just about every kind of problem you have in life, if you dig down deep enough, you can get to the core of, why am I like this? Why did I do this thing? And usually we're somewhere in our past or present, we've been hurt by something. Something has gotten into us and it causes us to react in certain ways that we wouldn't naturally. So say I was picked on as a kid, now I have self-esteem issues, and now I'm an adult and now I'm angry at everybody. I might not know why I'm angry, but these programs, they help you to get into the core and look at, wait, this thing happened to me here. This is why I'm angry. And the only way we can come to any kind of growth is, once you've isolated the issue, come to a point where you can let it go. And that goes through the whole process of amends or forgiveness or whatever. Or I did something horribly wrong, and now I need to make amends for it. I have to apologize. And that's where it seems that people across the world, no matter what race or religion, have in common. If you can get these concepts, you will find so much more peace and emotional wellness in your life.
I love that. And I think, I have a friend who is active in at least two of the 12-step recovery programs, and he shares the lessons he learns in that. And I can't help but think that we all, whether we're in recovery or not, the inner work that comes with these programs is phenomenal. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on some of that inner work. But one of the tenets, the underlying things, was when we're feeling victimized and we're feeling that past trauma, it's easy to keep repeating patterns. But one of the things I've found is that a lot of the 12-step programs, they really focus on going beyond the individual to serving the greater good around us, if that's the word. So I'd love your thoughts on that in particular.
Oh, absolutely. Like, that one thing I know about people who've been in recovery is when they figured it out and they found healing in it, they love to spread the message. They were like, I can't believe it took me this long to understand this. And they've been in the pit and they see the other people in the pit and would want to just grab you and pull you out and be like, this is awesome. Come check this out. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how these principles can be applied to just every form of issue. I know that some things like AA is specific for alcohol, or NA is for narcotics. And the reason Celebrate Recovery is one of my favorites is because you can use it for anything. I'll go in there and it'd be like, well, I struggle with codependency, anger, and control issues, or I have depression, or whatever it is. And you work through those things in detail. You find people you can trust, and it's another confidential ministry that it's I don't even know how to describe how much it just works through your issues. There's been so much healing in those kinds of programs, and it's just another one of those safe spaces where we got to stop wearing our masks. That's the that's the short answer. Is we all tend to wear masks that we want people to perceive of us, and we need a place where we can take off the mask, be genuine, be authentic, both about, our intentions, our feelings, and what we're going through. And that's the only way to find any kind of healing.
And I think that's a great analogy because, ironically, a lot of pain and suffering is because a mask we've put to the world has been rejected. And we turn that inwards on ourselves. Whereas I think when we recognize these masks don't serve us, people always ask, how do you be so authentic? And I've learned through my own wellness journey that the only way I can be authentic is to be me. As you say, take that mask off. And I'm genuinely okay if somebody doesn't like what they see in me. Um, the odds are good that my life is better without them in it. I mean, obviously, I can learn a lesson from it. Maybe it is something I should improve, but if it's something core, for example, you mentioned that you're Christian. If somebody comes to you and says, well, I don't like Christianity, we don't need to find common ground. We can agree that we're not going to have a conversation beyond that. Is that fair?
That's fair.
So how does one, and I want to hear your story here, because I know by day you're a realtor. So how does one either become from a realtor become a Stephen minister and a recovery sponsor, or were you Stephen minister / recovery sponsor and you became a realtor?
Yeah, it was definitely the other way around. I definitely would say recovery came first. When I was at a low point in life and I had to figure out how to get my own headspace in the right place. And after that, I came to a point where I understood how to help others, and I wanted people to get to the place where I was. So I actually entered into the Stephen Ministries at that point. I went through training, and I was better equipped to deal with other people, and better equipped to listen, and better equipped to um, basically just give grace and accept people where they're at. Um, and then just further down the road, I went into real estate industry, and honestly, the high pressure that some real estate agents can put on people is like door knockers, and we want to aggressively come at you to sell stuff. No, I just want to help people. I see lots of people out there who are struggling to get into places, and I wanted to be able to. I just love being able to help my community. Um, I have been in places in life where I have been homeless. I have been without, and not knowing where you're going to lay your head, or not knowing where, again, back to the theme of safe space. It's not a good place to be. It's not good for you emotionally. It's not good for you physically. It doesn't, any of those hierarchy of needs, it doesn't cover a whole lot of it. So, just it's been an interesting journey, and I'm happy where I'm at, and I'm happy to be able to utilize my time in different ways um, to give back to the community and help people struggling.
I love it. And I think one of my favorite quotes, and it's sad because I honestly don't remember where I heard it. My favorite quote is turn your mess into your message. I think there's something very, again, authentic about you. You are truly one of those servant leader types. You've worked through, and this is a Winston Churchill quote: when you're going through hell, keep going, and once you make it out, help others. I love that quote because it's literally how you're living your life at this point. You've gone through your personal hell. You've found your faith in that. Um, I love that you're turning that lesson to help others. And this was not part of the plan for today, but in our community, and I think a lot of communities post COVID, we're seeing a lot of homeless tent cities popping up. And just for your benefit and for the listeners, winter in Georgia is way nicer than winter in Alberta. We can get to minus 32, and it doesn't matter at that point, Fahrenheit or Celsius, it's cold. But I think it's good to hear that you're working on helping people with that security, talking about Maslow's needs. You're not going to convince somebody that they should be giving to others and helping if they don't have the basics of food and shelter covered. All right, well, let's switch gears because I think you and I have talked about role playing. This is actually going to be fun for the conversation. So tell me about your thoughts on role playing, and I'm going to use the buzzword gamification. But how does that apply to wellness?
Well, I think in a previous talk of ours, I had expressed that I had extensive background in role-playing games. If I'm name dropping, yes, I'll say Dungeons and Dragons is where I got my start 20 or so years ago, and I've played through a few others. But one thing I've noticed about my own ability to minister and listen to people, it came from how I interacted in those kind of games. It it opens up. You have to have a certain awareness when you're playing these games, especially when you're playing with theater of the mind, which for people who don't know what that is, theater of the mind is where you basically a scenario is described to you and you have to imagine it in your head. Some people, they have the little figures and stuff, but that's not necessary. And when you have to imagine stuff in your head, you have to ask questions. You have to be aware. You have to try to get a grip of what's going on exactly. So when you speak to game master, you say, okay, what is this room like? That person over there, what do they look like? What do they sound like? And you have all these social interactions with people that aren't really there, which it's great for practice in this kind of stuff. So that gave me an idea because I've gone through the Stephen ministry training, and there's actually a lot of role-playing scenarios when we go through this training. It'd be like, this person's going through this struggle, this is how you should react, and we'll have role-playing things that go along with it. So I thought it would be interesting. I've been kind of playing around with conceptualizing. I've been putting together a little something, and my Stephen ministers don't know this yet, but I'm going to be using them as some guinea pigs for some training exercises. I'm going to be creating a little kind of role-playing game per se, where we can work out some of these scenarios and get better practice at understanding and speaking to people. So that's something I'm working on right now. There's definitely already programs out there who help people work out issues through role playing. I don't have them listed with me today, but there's definitely been evidence. I've looked at a few studies that people who are actually going through any kind of counseling or stuff, role playing is very beneficial to a lot of them. Because say this thing happened in your past, and say one of your parents died, but he was an abusive parent, and you never got to I never got to tell them what I feel or whatever it is, and it may be beneficial to help someone role play through that instance to work out the feelings that they never actually got to work out. Role playing has so many different avenues for how it can be helpful for mental health. So
I love that. And one thing I'll share, I do a lot of research on, the brain and neuroscience and how the brain works. And I find it absolutely fascinating. And I don't think this is a secret. Elite athletes have been doing this for decades. But the brain literally doesn't know the difference between a role played scenario and the actual had that happened in life. And I think that's the myth of, as you said, if you have an abusive parent and they pass away, people think, oh, I can't get closure, they're dead. Well, closure is about you, not the deceased person. So um, I kind of think that maybe this is part of the wisdom baked into the recovery programs is, making amends and forgiving. Because if we go the step of making amends, and sometimes that amends needs to be to us, not just outside but internal. If we make the amends but we don't forgive, um, we're not going to have that closure to healing.
mm-mm.
And I think, there was a television show, I can't even remember the name of it. It was about a hapless character who, they made a comedy out of him making his amends. It had something to do, the guy's name was Earl. Terrible, terrible plot, but
My name is Earl.
yeah, it was My Name is Earl. There we go.
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about the making light of making amends, but I remember one or two cases where somebody was dead and he's like, oh crap, I can't complete my journey because I can't make amends.
Mhm.
And obviously some of the comedy was around the lengths he'd have to go to make those amends.
Yes, those are definitely some real world circumstances. Like it's something I had to go through with my own steps in life. Like my first wife, she passed away 7 years ago of a heroin overdose, and there was a lot of craziness that went into that life in that period of time in my life, and as you might can imagine, and I went through the steps in the recovery after that point, and it was one of those things where it's like I can't speak to this person.
Yeah.
Like I never actually dealt with the codependencies. She just died, and I never actually had to work through the issues. You know, those were things that I still had to work through. And through various kinds of role play, we kind of in a way we kind of sometimes do that with sponsors in those programs. If you have a sponsor and you have to make those amends and someone's not there, sometimes they will role play with you and help you work through whatever it is. um, so it's very beneficial to have that skill, to be able to role play with someone to help them get through it.
And I would point out, if I may, and I'd love your feedback on this. One of the things I hear is a lot of helpers, people with that heart of service, they're burning out because they don't know how to do the self care themselves. And sometimes what I hear is, they end up owning the baggage, like they take it on themselves. Um, I don't think that's the intention, but how are you, as a person who's been through all of this, how are you making sure you're well and able to care for people without being overwhelmed by the stories they share with you?
Well, one of the things they say in recovery is, take it one day at a time. And even though I'm way past a certain issues in my life, it's not something that I know that it's something I have to keep working on every day. You know, I I still participate in the recovery programs, even though I have no substance abuse issues. I have no anything like that, but I know I need to go back and keep this in the right place. If I can't keep my own head in the right place, I can't be a help to others. Um, because I could get snappy. I could get in a bad mood. How would you feel if I was caring for you and I just started going off on you, or just started giving you terrible advice just because I had a bad day? That doesn't work out for anyone. It doesn't help them. It doesn't help you. It doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help the people in their situation. Like, you have to be able to fill your own cup before you can pour into others. In scripture it says, love others as yourself, but you have to also love yourself. That doesn't negate the fact that you love yourself. Some people, when they try to go into not just caring ministries, but other volunteer kind of things, they try to help people so much, but they don't help themselves at all. You have to help yourself. You have to love yourself. That's in that scripture. Without that, you're a mess. You're a mess, and you're messing everybody else up. So I maintain, I keep going to recovery. I read scriptures, I listen to podcasts, read books. There's all the things that I need to hear to make sure that I am in a place of grace and loving, so that I can accept other people where they're at and be able to extend that grace and love to other people around.
I love that. So I'm going to go on a slight tangent, but you mentioned some things that you do. What are some of your favorite books or podcasts or resources? And I know you've mentioned a few, but I think one of the things about wellness is I love the word grace, because it's the only word that seems to fit. We need to give ourselves grace. We need to give others grace. What are some of the resources you turn to make sure you stay in that place of grace?
Well, on a regular basis, like I said, I do participate with Celebrate Recovery, and that is a 12-step program, and they have a whole training book. They have these step study books, that there's a whole workbook that you go through. There's also, it's like a 9-month to year-long program where you'll sit down with a group of men or women. Just, it's gender based. So and you work through issues. That's one thing I like to do every once in a while. Maybe every couple of years I'll do one of those. I definitely look through scripture. I have devotionals I'll do, different authors I might read. Most of them are primarily Christian. Right now I'm actually reading Battlefield of the Mind by Joyce Meyer. I'm almost done with that one. There's different folks on YouTube. I'll be watching other ministers or pastors talk. Let me see here. I can actually try to pull up some of my library here. What have I read through? Oh, there's some good books about boundaries. There's a good book called Know What You're For by Jeff Henderson. That's a really good one. It's kind of Christ-based, but it's also it's geared kind of towards business and running business, but it kind of helps you focus your mind on where you're supposed to be. Let's see, Counterfeit Gods by Timothy Keller. I love that book. Let's see, 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. That one's okay. Other Love and Respect is a great book, especially for couples. It helps us. It's kind of twofold for if you're in a relationship. It helps women understand how to respect their husbands, and it helps men understand how to love their wives, because we're both tend to be geared for one emotion rather than the other. There's just lots of good little resources that I do on a regular basis that just help keep me grounded. And also with this Stephen ministry we do regularly continuing education through that also helps. So
Love it. Now I'm going to just point something out, and I want your honest feedback on this, because I'm thinking out loud. A lot of people, they'll turn to a friend and they want to share their woes. And personally, I don't love that approach because it's less than helpful. I'm just thinking out loud that even if they would role play, because in my opinion, when you keep replaying events of the past, you just keep digging the groove in that record deeper and it becomes more entrenched. I'm just thinking out loud that role playing would be absolutely phenomenal. Just asking the simple question of what could you have done differently or how could you have reacted differently. Um, what are your favorite? This is totally off script here. What are your favorite role playing or gaming resources?
Gaming resources. I'd love to give you some good gaming resources. Honestly, most of the games I play, they tend to give good mechanics
Yeah,
for how to interact, not the actual interaction.
yeah,
Um, where usually the interaction is learned through actually playing the game and interacting with people, with a game master versus a player. I could list, yeah, Dungeons and Dragons, I can do this, or in Fate Core, I can do this, or you know, Pathfinder, Star Wars, they have all these ways to role play, but it's the role playing is not as inherent in the books, is just
yeah,
how you're supposed to interact. The actual role playing is done between the people.
yeah,
And just like I'd love to promote those games, if you were a person who's just a gamer and you go find a group, you can find a great group, you can find a terrible group. You can
yeah,
find someone who's great at role playing and you have an amazing experience and you learn how to role play, or you can go find someone and have a terrible experience and they have no idea what they're doing, and it it's all about the people and learning
yeah.
to interact.
Well, I'm going to publicly admit something, and again, if people don't like who I am, I'm okay with that. We are huge, huge fans of the show The Big Bang Theory, and
Hmm.
um, I'm a nerd. My wife's a nerd. We're raising a pair of nerds, and in one of the episodes, Sheldon Cooper, one of the characters, he decides to use the dice to decide non-essential things for him.
Yeah.
And he's a big, big fan of Dungeons and Dragons. I'm thinking out loud, this is not a project for Stephen and Jeff today, but I feel like this is a valuable project. Everybody's telling parents to talk to their kids about, sex and drugs and, all these things. Um, I feel like there could be a role-playing game out there, and maybe there is one where parents could practice with other parents before just jumping in and having the conversation with their teenager.
Well,
Did
that's
I hit something?
that's kind of what I've been trying to work on for my training for my ministers. And they don't, like I said, they don't know it yet, but it's kind of something where they're going to have a dice and roll up kind of some aspects of their personality, like, oh, I'm a baby boomer, or oh, I'm a millennial or something. And then like, oh, I am a blue collar worker, a white collar worker, and they'll kind of have a little personality in mind. And
Yeah,
then when it comes to actually interacting between somebody, you'll have to roll a dice and decide whether you're going to respond aggressively, assertively, passively, passive aggressively, or like it will determine how your particular person is going to react to something that's happening to them. And so I wanted to use that for my ministers to be able to practice and kind of, like think of some things that are kind of outside the norm, because in this kind of ministry, you can get so many different things that you would never even imagine,
yeah.
uh, like scenarios and situations, and be like, wow. And you cannot, you cannot just do this face. And when someone's telling you, like, oh, I did all this stuff and this thing happened, and be like
Ah,
that immediately takes away your credibility. And you like loving people where they're at doesn't look like this. Yeah. So we
that
we we have to practice in order to be able to to interact accordingly, because we all have our own ingrained biases and things that we were raised with that we kind of have to break away from um, in order to be empathetic.
Well, and I think that's one of the keys. A friend of mine has taught me a lot about self-awareness. She's a social worker, and she said the biggest problem in social work is if you haven't done the internal work, you're going to reflect your biases, your history. You're going to be triggered, and as you said, loving someone doesn't look like you've recoiled in horror. You need to just be um, you know, to look at the notable people in history who've been caring. If we go back to Jesus, the teachings are that he was there for everyone as they were. And I think that's an important place for your ministers to get to, is to be able to, you don't want to be jaded to the point where you can say, oh yeah, I've heard that before, but you should at least be able to say, thank you for sharing. I'm sure that was very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, that that's definitely one of the big key things we focus on in training. Like we do training for these ministers, and it's over like a 4 or 5 month period. Like we finally have some guys graduating tonight who we started in January. We've been meeting weekly for 2.5 hours, and there's these huge training books that we go through, and those are the first things that we have to learn and be aware of is number one, how to listen. Number two, how to make sure that they feel safe with us.
Yeah.
Because you've got to break down those walls. You've got to be, and not aggressively. You have to let them feel safe with actual safety.
That's the rub, isn't it? Okay.
Yes.
So, listeners, you heard it here first. Stephen is committed to coming back in the future to update us on this project, because I'm thinking about this as a parent. Why wouldn't I leverage role playing? Kids hate lectures. So, if I want my kids to learn something, I'm going to bury it in a video game or a game of some sort. I haven't gone down the road of Dungeons and Dragons because honestly, I have OCD, and it looks like one of those things where I'd spend way too many hours on. But having said that, knowing that, my kids live in a world where there are literal Dungeons and Dragons around, might be fun to come up with a scenario or two to help them navigate.
Absolutely.
All right, Stephen, you opened this can of worms. You and I are going to explore it further. First of all, I want to ask you, how can people get to know you? How can they explore more about the work you're doing?
Well, the work I'm doing specifically, I could tell you all about. Well, I'll tell you about Stephen Ministry in the first place. So, like I said before, it's a national program. So I'm basically like the franchisee at my particular church for Stephen Ministry. It's actually a place. It's based out of St. Louis, where the center of Stephen Ministries is, but they plant Stephen Ministers all around the country. So no matter where you are, you could probably call around and find a church around you that has a Stephen Ministry. And like I said, it is a confidential care ministry. If you're struggling through something, you can reach out and be able to find someone to talk to, and nobody's going to know. Nobody's going to know about it. It's free. That's also another thing, is a free ministry. So you don't have to pay a thing. Now that one caveat is we are not licensed therapists, counselors, anything like that. We do not do any kind of official recommendations. We can't give you medications. We can't do any of that stuff. No legal advice, blah, 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 blah. We're not there for that. We are there to listen, love, and care and pray for you. So that's one caveat. I can tell you about Celebrate Recovery. It is also a nationally recognized ministry It was originally based out of Saddleback Church in California. But it also has ministries planted in churches all over the nation. They actually have an app. They have a website you can go to if you're struggling through any kind of problems and you feel like a 12-step program would work great for you. You can search it and find a place in your area, and there's usually groups to go to. As far as real estate, if you ever find yourself in Georgia and you want to reach out to me, uh, I can always give any kind of information. Just look me up by my name. You can find me on Facebook. I'm also a part of Red Briar Realty. So any other questions for me, Jeff?
Well, no, actually, I just wanted to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. For the listeners, Stephen has 7 children, so he's busy saving lives and raising children. So thank you very much for your time today, Stephen.
Thanks so much, Jeff. I appreciate you having me on. It's been a blast.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to our show. We hope that you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to either click the link below or scan the QR code to register and listen to other episodes of our podcast. Or if you think your business or you would be a great guest to be on our show, we're always looking for experts in one of the 9 elements of holistic wellness. We'd love to have you. You can either click the link below or you can scan the QR code and complete our speaker intake form. Thank you, and to your wellness.